to UU Santa Rosa. If you want just a quick gander, we have some important values of our community that can be found on the outside of your order of service here. And I also want to say a shout out to those who are on Zoom. Do you want to turn around and wave to them? Hello, folks. It's great to see you this morning. Do we know how many folks are with us on Zoom? How many screens we have this morning? 35, not bad for a holiday weekend. Hey, everybody. I want to let you know that during the times of COVID, we are still going to be having some changes. We're asking you to stay distanced and masked in the sanctuary, and we won't be going back to 2 services until at least next year. So make sure you know that 10:30 on Sunday mornings is still going to be the best time of the week. The most important thing to know is that no matter who you are, no matter what you believe, no matter what burdens or joys brought you here today, no matter who you love or how you celebrate, you're welcome here. You're wanted here. You are among us, and we are part of an interconnected web of the whole. Welcome to UU Santa Rosa. I'm going to ask Mike McGurr to come up and light the chalice this morning. This is Mike's first shadowing as a new worship associate, folks. And I'm going to ask Judy to come forward and say our chalice lighting words.
May the flame cast its light towards the coming days, reminding us that the future is not simply a place we are going, but a place we are creating. The path of new possibilities will not be found, but made. A new world is waiting to be built. May our time together light the way.
I'm still getting used to this new gig, so I think I made the announcements in with the opening words, which is that we still want you to stay masked, and we're going to stay to 1 service. So thank you very much. Every year, the Unitarian Universalist Association puts out a series of monthly themes that they call Soul Matters. We pay attention to those here in worship. We pay attention to them in religious education. And there are small groups that get together and think about and ruminate on what it means to be a people of whatever the theme is of the month. And this month it is cultivating possibility. What does it mean to be a people of cultivating possibility? I'd like to welcome one of those Soul Matters participants up to our pulpit now to give testimony on what it's like to be part of one of those groups.
First, a question. How many of you were humming along to Someone's in the Kitchen with Dinah just a few minutes ago? I sure was. Good morning. My name is Greg Irvis, and I'm here to tell you a little bit about my experiences in being in and co-facilitating a Soul Matters group for some 18 months now. One day, my wife, Judy, mentioned a new program that UUCSR was rolling out, and after some discussions, I decided it looked good enough to learn about, so we signed up for a meeting to learn more about the mechanics of the program. We soon discovered that the material in Soul Matters monthly assignment was some of the richest, most thought-provoking, and fully developed material for introspection that we had ever seen. Let me outline the Soul Matters design for you. Each month, you get a packet that's centered around one word. For example, play, becoming, commitment, and beloved community were some of the more recent examples. Inside the packet are structured suggestions as to how to think about your relationship to the title of the packet. To say that these suggestions are well thought out would be a big, big understatement. You are given spiritual exercises that center on the monthly word And then you are, within the packet, presented with a list of questions related to the monthly word. In your Soul Matters meeting, you will have an opportunity, should you choose, to share with the group your thoughts and reflections on what you came to realize about your relationship to the monthly word when you did the exercises. Additionally, the packet contains what are called companion pieces, material that help you think about what's going on. Adding to these are sections entitled poetry, music, videos and podcasts, articles, and books. You will have enough auxiliary material to keep you busy for an entire month. If this sounds too overwhelming, do not worry. You do as much or as little of the material as you want. But for me, where, so to speak, the rubber hit the road, was in the bonds that we developed within our group that I was in. We had 2 meetings in our home, and then COVID-19 descended upon the land. Well, hello, Zoom. And that worked out far better for our purposes than I ever thought it would. The level of openness that we achieved in a relatively short time was quite remarkable, and our monthly meetings were something I really, really started looking forward to. And yes, we lost some initial members along the way due to illness or other reasons, but we brought new members into the circle, and they quickly became as valued as did the veterans. So in summation, Soul Matters is an excellent program. Your time commitment is what you're comfortable with. The topics are worthy, and you'll form bonds within your group that will endure. I can't say enough about how valuable this experience was to me and will be moving forward. Katie and Bruce are going to be in the courtyard to answer any questions you might have and to help you sign up for a group that fits into your schedule. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Just a couple of other announcements. Era Capone, our Director of Religious Education, and the children are taking a break this Sunday, as you may have noticed. They're going to be back with us next week for our annual multi-generational in-gathering service. A lot of that service is going to take place outside, and the kittens are going to be very involved, so I hope you all will join us then. If you are a member of the congregation, please remember that the Constant Contact email system is our official UUCSR information source. Don't rely on the focus list for the latest from Reverend Julie or our director, Kate Taylor. Some members have said they're having difficulty getting those emails. If you're one of those, please let me know after the service, and we'll get you some help to get connected to that system. Also, you have heard the last couple of weeks that we can still use some help for Daniel and Andy and some of the other folks doing the sound and lights and general setup for the service. They're making the live streaming possible, as well as your ability to hear us through all of this stuff. So if you would like to join them, and if you don't have experience, they will train you. Please see the fellows in the back after the service. Sally Jones, our lead music coordinator, is right down here looking for musicians and choir members. So please let her know if you would like to join in that effort. Music has always been one of the most wonderful parts of this congregation, and it can only happen with our participation. So please join me now in Rising as You Are Able in hymn number 109.
So for those of you who read music, we're using the words from the hymnal, but we are not using the tune from the hymnal. We're using the original Red and Roses tune.
Shall
In this time of uncertainty and anxiety about the future, the work we do here and the support we give to other organizations working in the larger community have become increasingly important to those we serve. All that we do here is only possible through your generosity. Let that generosity expand and raise our spirits as we deepen our connections to those around us. Each week, we share our donation basket with a community group that needs our support. Today, we'll be sharing the basket with our own Saturday breakfast for our neighbors, whose intrepid volunteers have been serving nourishing food to anyone who needs it all through the COVID crisis, and they just keep on trucking. Please be as generous as you can. During the offering, you may light a candle to mark a personal milestone or joy or sorrow, if you like, but please wait until the ushers have passed your row to get up. And also a reminder to socially distance while waiting in line to light a candle. Will the ushers and candle assistants please come forward? dedicating these offerings to, I'm saying the words, sorry. Please join me in dedicating these offerings. The words are in your order of service. To the work of creating beloved community within and beyond our walls, we dedicate these offerings and ourselves.
I'd like to invite the lay chaplain of the day up.
Good morning. I'm Judy Irvis, your lay chaplain for today. We are all carrying deep grief and sorrow for all that is happening on our planet, in our country, in our beloved community here at UUCSR, and for some in our personal lives. It is likely that most of us are here because we feel the need for connection and support during these difficult times. The Milestones Book is a place where you can share your joys and sorrows and other milestones with the congregation. Before services, the Milestones Book can be found on the stand just outside the sanctuary door. After the service, I will be available if you'd like to talk. And if you have concerns for which you'd like a listening ear and support at a different time, please fill out a pastoral care request card and place it in the box on the table at the back of the sanctuary. Copies of this card can be found next to the box and also in the pews with the hymnals. One of the lay chaplains will be in touch with you. These are the entries for this week. Yesterday, September 4th, Kathy and Bill Staten celebrated their 67th wedding anniversary. Late this morning, and Bill says, "I love being married to Kathy." This is from Mary Wolf. Last week I shared about my neighbor Lana being on hospice. I talked to her niece. It's very close. Let's help Lana on her next journey. May we all hold these shared joys and sorrows in our hearts.
May we know that the grief that we feel is born of a love of something that we are missing. May we seek that love and remember it and root ourselves in that love, for it is not just born of us. It is larger than us. It reaches into all things and beings on the planet and maybe beyond. It creates an interdependent web of which we are all a part, and we are held in that web. We are held in that web always, never alone, always connected, full of love. Amen. I invite you now to reach into that part of you in which that love is born, the part of you that connects with something that is larger than you, whether that be a divine power, whether that be the power of love itself, whether it be the gracious power of community. I invite you to take a good few 3-5 minutes to sit in silence, reckoning with the part of you that connects to awe and mystery and wonder in the universe. Take this moment. We will come out singing.
I started working at about the age of 6 in my parents' enormous vegetable garden. I was paid 1 penny for every big, ugly potato bug I picked off the plants. My job connected me to the earth, taught me not to be afraid of bugs, and gave me the satisfaction of helping to put food on the table. I also liked the clink of those pennies when I put them in my piggy bank. When I was about 12, I started babysitting for a family with 4 children. The going rate in those days was 50 cents an hour, for which I was expected to feed, entertain without the aid of screens, give 4 baths, get everyone to bed on time, and clean up the house before the parents came home. In my teens, I spent one mind-numbing summer working as a motel maid, making 25 to 30 beds a day, scrubbing toilets and sinks, and vacuuming for a paltry sum. So I was thrilled when I started waitressing and could earn tips. One especially memorable waitressing job was at a very busy Holiday Inn. I was working the breakfast and lunch shift with a small kitchen staff. John, the lead cook, was probably in his early 50s, about 6'2", with an ashen pallor and a very short fuse. The 30-something assistant cook, Mark, who at the time I naively thought of as high-strung, was more likely just high. And then there was little Helen, the friendly salad lady and dishwasher, a chain smoker with long, stringy hair to whom life had not been kind. One Sunday morning at the height of the tourist season, the restaurant was packed, and we were all moving as fast as we could to get breakfast served and keep the coffee flowing. I went to the kitchen with an order for a bowl of oatmeal, just as John came to the end of that very short fuse. He filled a bowl with steaming hot oatmeal and threw it across the room directly at my face. Luckily, I ducked and it missed, but I ran out of the kitchen in shock with my heart pounding, shaking like a leaf. When I summoned up the courage to go back into the kitchen, Helen had cleaned up the mess. Mark handed me a fresh bowl of oatmeal and said, "Oh, don't take it personally. He threw a knife at me last week." Though John never apologized to me, he knew he'd crossed a line. And in his own gruff manner, he was kind to me the rest of the time I worked there. Later, I worked at a used car auto auction and learned to jump dead batteries, coax stubborn transmissions into action, and cope with less than reliable brakes. While there, I became friends with a young single mother who had learning disabilities. For me, that job was temporary. For her, it was the only thing keeping her and her young daughter from homelessness. In graduate school, I did a short stint at General Electric as a secretary, preparing and making mistakes on endless reports about how many ovens and dishwashers had been sold. My boss, the vice president of sales, was a stern and demanding man who never cracked a smile. I saw him as tyrannical and uncaring. It was like being in Mad Men, minus the pretty clothes, sex, and alcohol. The whole environment was an affront to my feisty feminist sensitivities, and I hated it. I went home every night and cried, but I couldn't quit because I needed the money to get through school. All these jobs taught me the important life lessons one might expect. Any job worth doing is worth doing well. You can make a contribution even with the most menial work. You can do more than you think you can. You can survive and learn from difficult circumstances. And there's great satisfaction in paying your own way. But if you had told the younger me that work was a spiritual practice, I wouldn't have had a clue what you were talking about. From the vantage point of age and experience, I've come to believe that spiritual practice is simply paying attention, being mindful of all we do every day, no matter the task. As Kahlil Gibran said, work is love made visible. When I look back now, love can be found in all the jobs I had along the way. It's easily apparent in helping in the family garden as a youngster, not so much in making beds and scrubbing toilets. But even there, I could bring my best self to the task. I could welcome the next tourist to a sparkling, clean room. I am struck now by the compassion and kindness that was shown to me even in that busy Holiday Inn kitchen. I was on the receiving end of love when Helen cleaned up the mess, Mark tried to reassure me, and John attempted to make amends. I saw love in action at the auto auction, watching my friend do whatever she had to do to the best of her ability to take care of her daughter. The job at General Electric was a real speed bump on my spiritual path. It's said that all situations teach you, and often it's the tough ones that teach you best. Eventually, I learned to step back from my own narrow, self-centered focus and pay attention to the bigger picture, to be curious about my boss, about his backstory, to be more compassionate and less judgmental. And as the Quakers say, to find that of God in everyone. These are all lessons I'm still learning today. Even in retirement, my spiritual practice is to bring my highest and best self to the tasks at hand and to make love visible in all that I do each and every day.
Tumble out of bed and I stumble to the kitchen, pour myself a cup of ambition and yawn and stretch and try to come alive. Jump in the shower and the blood starts pumping. Out on the street, the traffic starts jumping with folks like me on the job from 9 to 5. Working 9 to 5, what a day to make a living. Getting by, it's all taking and not giving. They just use your mind and they never give you credit. It's enough to drive you crazy if you let it. 9 to 5, for service and devotion. You would think that I would deserve a fair promotion. Want to move ahead, but the boss don't seem to let me. I swear sometimes that man is out to get me. He lets you dream just to watch him shatter. You're just a step on the boss man's ladder, but you've got dreams they'll never take away. In the same boat with a lot of your friends, waiting for the day your ship will come in and the tide's gonna turn and it's all gonna roll your way. Working 9 to 5, what a way to make a living. Getting by, it's all taking and no giving. They just use your mind and you never get the credit. It's enough to drive you crazy if you let it. 9 to 5, yeah, they got you where they want you. There's a better life, and you dream about it, don't you? It's a rich man's game, no matter what they call it. And you spend your life putting money in his pocket. 9 to 5, you're working 9 to 5, just 9 to 5. It's enough to drive you crazy if you let it. 9 to 5, they got you where they want you. There's a better life, and you dream about it, don't you? It's a rich man's game, no matter what they call it. And you spend your life putting money in his pocket, working.
A poem by Shel Silverstein. I'd rather play tennis than go to the dentist. I'd rather play soccer than go to the doctor. I'd rather play herc than go to work. Herc. Herc? What's herc? I don't know, but it's got to be better than work. But wait a minute. Dolly Parton saying 9 to 5, what a way to make a living. Shel Silverstein saying anything's got to be better than work, but Judy just said work was a spiritual practice. Khalil Gibran said that work was love made visible. So what is it? What do we do when our poets and sages disagree with each other? Certainly, work hasn't always been as lauded as it is by our current Protestant work ethics. If you hearken back to the beginning of the Old Testament, God kicked Adam and Eve out of the Garden of Eden, saying, "Now you're going to have to work for a living." He even said the only way you get sustenance is at the end of painful toil. That sounds like necessity, not dignity to me. And it's also confusing in our political system, isn't it? At the beginning of every election cycle, you can't get a politician to get through a sentence without mentioning hard-working Americans. But a study by Princeton University showed that America is more of a plutocracy or an oligarchy than a democracy, because every time the needs of the hardworking Americans come up against the rich corporate needs, it's almost always the corporations who win. I know that well because I had to look at my Teamster father's face the day that Michigan the home of the sit-down strikes, the home of the UAW, became a right-to-work state. So what is it? What is it? Is work a spiritual practice? Is it something that we should laud as a way for self-actualization and autonomy? Or is it kind of a drag? Maybe our answer can be found more nuanced in another sage. In 1992, there was a man named Michael Honey. What a name, Michael Honey. There was a man named Michael Honey, and he was working at the Martin Luther King Institute in Atlanta. And he was going through an old, neglected filing cabinet, and in it he found a dusty old folder that said, King's Labor Speeches. King's Labor Speeches? How many of us have ever heard a King's Labor Speech? Maybe nowadays we might have heard more, but almost all of the speeches that he found at that time were unpublished. So he went through the folder and he edited it, and he came out with the result of a publication published by the Unitarian Universalist Beacon Press in 2011. And it was called All Labor Has Dignity. All Labor Has Dignity. That was the name of this publication, taken from a quote from within it. But if you read through the speeches in this publication, All Labor Has Dignity, King concludes that yes, all labor has dignity, but not all workers are afforded dignity. All labor has dignity, but not all laborers. Bill Schultz is a former president of the Unitarian Universalist Association, and when he retired from that lauded position, he became the vice president of a little organization called Habitat for Humanity. Maybe you've heard of it. Bill Schultz went around the world overseeing projects, giving people who were in degraded circumstances in other countries a little bit of dignity, a home, a place to live. And he came back to the United States, and at a General Assembly, he gave a speech in which he said, I no longer believe in the first principle. I no longer believe in the first principle. I no longer believe that human beings have inherent dignity. I think they have inherent worth, but I think sometimes they are not given dignity by their circumstances. So this idea of dignity, this idea of laborer dignity, it goes to the core of our very faith. It goes to the core of who we are as Unitarian Universalists and the principles of our faith. So how did we come up with this idea that your worth was through your labor? That anybody could achieve the American dream if they pulled themselves up by their bootstraps and went ahead and worked hard? How did we come up with this idea? Historically, it looks like its prominence emerged in the 19th century when it was true if you were a white man who could get himself a little parcel of land, if you worked really hard, that was probably the time in history when you were most able to actually live out the American dream. Except you were probably doing it with the benefit of maybe some slave labor, and you were definitely doing it on stolen indigenous land. Coleman Young, the former mayor of Detroit, always said, they tell us to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, but what do you do when they steal your boots? So we are in this period where we get this idea that labor is the thing that you have to do. It's a moral imperative. Not only is it a way of self-actualization, it is a moral imperative. You're a lazy freeloader if you don't do it. You should break your own bonds of slavery and make a living wage. Come on, folks. And then we get to the Industrial Revolution, and we think maybe this is gonna help things. There's gonna be more labor at this point. You know, we've had the Emancipation Proclamation. We gave the Indians all those nice reservations. It's gonna be better now, right? Industrial Revolution. But now, almost all of the labor is owned by just a few large corporations. So now not only, if you want to see the fruits of your labor, if you want to own the means of your own production, do you have to be a white man, you have to be a rich white man. And forget that idea of work, of the satisfaction of work, of a finished project. It's gone. Gone are the days of cobblers putting together a shoe in their little shop, and when it's finished, having the satisfaction of putting it in the window to sell, knowing that they made that painstakingly from beginning to end. Nope, now it's the assembly line. One person's stamping out the leather, the other person's stamping out the rubber. They never see the finished shoe. Cogs in a machine, and the working conditions weren't so good. The best anecdote that we've seen for this was the labor movements that arose and peaked in the 1930s. You know, Jacobin magazine also did an expose on race relations coming out of the labor movements. They said that one of the best things that ever happened for interracial dialogue in this country was the union movements of the 1930s. Because it's easy to see someone's humanity when you're locked arm in arm with them fighting for common dignity, right? That does a lot more than any corporate racial sensitivity seminar I've ever seen. But then we've been chipping away slowly at those rights in all of the decades to come. Until nowadays, it doesn't even matter if you're a rich white man, you basically just have to be Jeff Bezos. The Amazon warehouses, give me a guess, what do you think is the percentage of changeover that Amazon has in their worker warehouses every year? 50%? Anybody else? 80%? Yeah, it's 100%. It's 100% turnover at Amazon worker warehouses. Do you know I once lived with a man who worked in one of those warehouses? I was living in Detroit, and one of my friends, he had been to prison in the 1980s. He had been to prison for a nonviolent crime in the 1980s and was still struggling to get work. That's a whole nother sermon, how you're supposed to work when you can't get a job, right? He was still struggling to find work, so he found work in one of these warehouses. And every day he would come home and tell me of the mental toil of being tracked. Every step he took, of wondering if he had time to make it to the bathroom when he had to cross a giant warehouse to get there. But worst of all, his pay, his already meager pay, would get docked if he didn't lug these large packages from place to place quickly enough. And he would tell me they leave things in the middle of the aisle. They leave ladders. They leave packing material. They leave packages themselves. I want you to imagine this. You got a giant package on your shoulder, and somebody tells you that you have 10 seconds to get from where I'm standing to the back of the sanctuary. Do you have time to walk like this? No, you gotta go. And one day he fell, and he hurt his back, and he was out of work for a little while. And he got fired, and the union that he was in couldn't protect him under today's stripped-down labor rights. And nowadays, he sits at home nursing an injury, filing online job applications, listening to the news tell him how people don't want to work these days. Amazon was noted during the protests, the Black Lives Matter protests last summer. They donated $10 million. $10 million to racial justice organizations. That's good, right? That is really good. I still say it's really good. You should donate money to racial justice organizations. At the same time, Amazon was spending millions of dollars a year putting down an uprising of workers in Bessemer, Alabama. There was a warehouse in Bessemer, Alabama that was trying to organize a labor union there. And Amazon was spending $10,000 a day on consultants to try to counteract this labor uprising of people said that we basically want some more human rights in our working conditions. The racial makeup of that Bessemer, Alabama plant was 84% black. Black Lives Matter as long as you don't work for Amazon. So, Amazon even went to the extent, so the labor union people, I mean, it was a David and Goliath situation. Amazon was bringing people into the office and showing them these videos and saying, well, you know, if you unionize, we can't guarantee this plant is going to stay here, all kinds of things like that. But they were getting some traction because there was this street light right outside of the warehouse. And when the workers drove into the warehouse, they had to stop at this streetlight, and the labor organizers would run over to the streetlight and start talking to them. It was a captive audience. Amazon got the town to take out the streetlight. Amazon got the town to take out the streetlight. And why didn't you hear about this? You read it in the Washington Post, right? Oh, no, that's right. Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post. That's right. Okay. So look, this is church, and I'm being a bummer. It's a holiday weekend. You could be out canoeing, and yet you came here to hear me be a bummer. I got to tell you something we can do about it, right? Because that's the fun part. That's the fun part when we learn about how we can live our principles in the world. Well, one of the things that you can do is find alternate media to read about. I read so many opinions every day that I disagree with. It's really good for me. I read sort of right-wing magazines like the National Review just to say, all right, this is something that these folks are saying. There's mainstream magazines like The Atlantic that give an overall view of things from their perspective. And then there's like far left rags like Jacobin, like Labor Notes that give you another perspective. Too often nowadays, we're just reinforcing our own ideas from our own perspective. So I encourage you to read some things you think you're going to disagree with. That's one thing. That's one thing we can do is we can educate ourselves. We can educate ourselves. Another thing we can do, we can be like Iceland. Do you know what Iceland just did? Iceland just passed mandated maximum 35-hour-a-week laws. And worker happiness jumped through the roof. People are coming in and they're being more productive because they have time to be themselves and feed their spirits. Work can be a spiritual practice if your spirit isn't beleaguered already when you get there. And you know what the most amazing part to me of this study coming out of Iceland is? You know some of the people that are the most happy are women at home. Because the amount that men have been contributing to household work in Iceland since the 35-hour-a-week rule was imposed has also jumped through the roof. Workplace happiness, domestic happiness, personal satisfaction. Folks, we could be like Iceland. But the most immediate thing we could do, the most immediate and best thing we can do is to pay attention to our own backyard. California is becoming ground zero for labor rights movements. I was at the worship associate meeting yesterday. Y'all have some good worship associates. Can I hear it for them? Yes. I was at the worship associate meeting yesterday, and we were discussing how to contract a guest minister. And we had all kinds of questions about what the availability of this law, and did they have to be a temporary worker, or could they be a long-term or a contracted worker? And somebody brought up House Bill, or SB 22, I think it was, Senate Bill 22. And this was something that just didn't pass. It was about Uber and Lyft drivers. Uber and Lyft drivers wanted to be considered employees. But Uber and Lyft spent $45 million saying, no, you need to be contractors. So as it stands, we can't hire a guest minister to come in and preach once a year without making them a temporary employee. But Uber and Lyft drivers, they're not employees of Uber and Lyft. And I want you to pay special attention to this. Coming up, Assembly Bill 701. Write it down, put it in your phones. Assembly Bill 701. It already passed the California Assembly. It's ground zero for legislative work to make conditions in warehouses like Amazon better. I don't know how many of us work in an Amazon warehouse. I don't know how many of us know someone who works in an Amazon warehouse, but if we don't care about the rights and dignity and lives of those that are unlike ours, we are never going to be able to live into our principles and make sure that worth, even if it's not inherent from birth, is inherent in the way that we take care of each other in our culture. Dignity, even if it's not inherent from birth, is inherent in the way that we take care of each other in our culture. And standing here today, looking out at all of you, I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic because I know that you care. I know that you care about my friend who's back home nursing a back. I know that you care about the rights and dignity of everyone. I'm optimistic. I think that work still can be a spiritual practice, that we can all go to jobs that enliven us and make us feel purpose. I mean, heck, God tried to punish us by kicking us out of Eden and saying, now you have to work. But at the same time, he gave us knowledge and sex, and that worked out okay. We have to pay attention. We have to pay attention to the things that aren't happening to us. We cannot have a satisfied, intellectual, investigative, curious, alive world if people are asked to live their daily lives without basic dignity. Are you with me? Blessed be and amen. We're now going to sing a final hymn. It is not in your hymn book, but there should be an insert in your order of service. It's a good one, folks. Solidarity Forever. Stand up as you are willing and able and sing out loud.
The tune of the Battle Hymn of the Republic. When the Union's inspiration through the workers' blood shall run, there can be no greater power anywhere beneath the sun. Yet what force on earth is weaker than the Venus with the moon? But the Union makes us strong. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the Union makes us strong. It is we who plowed the prairies, built the cities where they trade, dug the mines and built the workshops, endless miles of railroad laid. Now we stand outcast and starving, midst the wonders we have made, but the Union makes us strong. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the Union makes us strong. They have taken untold millions that they never toiled to earn, but without our brains and muscle, not a single wheel can turn. We can break their haughty power, gain our freedom when we learn that the Union makes us strong. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the Union makes us strong. In our hands is placed a power greater than the
you, half of the things I said to you today were told to me by my husband, who's somewhat of a labor history buff. And he was born to professors in Ann Arbor, Michigan. He is not someone who has had to strive for and toil in labor in his life, but he cares about the working person so much that he was one of the leaders in the union movement in Ann Arbor, the student union movement, that allowed people, that asked that the student teachers not come back until proper COVID protocols were in place. Folks, it matters. Folks, it matters what we do. It matters the things that we say and what we care about. It matters that it doesn't just affect you, because if it affects me, it affects you, it affects everyone. I think I read somewhere something about a 7th principle in our faith that said that. I'm excited to spend the next couple of years in this community figuring out how we can build a better world together. Solidarity forever. Please sit and enjoy the postlude.